Have you ever wondered if your PCOS is tied to your Hashimoto's? In this video, I'm going to cover for you the top 4 ways that Hashimoto's or elevated thyroid antibodies drives PCOS or polycystic ovary syndrome. Now let's discuss if some of the strategies we'll explore in today's video will work for you as well. I first want to tell you a brief story about a patient I worked with. We're going to call her Lisa for confidentiality's sake. When she came to work with me, her main goal was to regulate her cycles that had gone missing after coming off of birth control and clear her skin after dealing with some cystic acne. Now, what we uncovered, though, may surprise you. When we did our advanced root cause testing so that we could understand why she was having irregular cycles and breakouts, what we found was that she actually had elevated thyroid antibodies and had a perfect picture of elevated androgens and inflammation, indicating possible PCOS. I refer her back over to her OBGYN so that she could have a pelvic ultrasound done, which did confirm the presence of multiple cysts or a pearl-like strand of cysts on the ovaries, which is indicative of PCOS. So let's get into the 4 root causes and how these played into her story. The first one is impaired ovulation and impaired HPO axis function. The HPO axis is our hypothalamus pituitary ovarian axis. It essentially is a fancy term that indicates how the brain is communicating with the ovaries. And when there is a presence of elevated thyroid antibodies driving this chronic inflammation process or impairing the amount of free thyroid hormones that are made, such as in the situation of hypothyroidism, this actually sends a feedback signal to the brain to make less gonadotropin-releasing hormone, or GnRH, which then impacts the amount of LH, or luteinizing hormone, and FSH, or follicular-stimulating hormone. FSH and LH are key hormones that are involved in the ovarian production of estradiol, or estrogen, and progesterone. And without adequate levels of LH and FSH, we don't have adequate amounts of estradiol and progesterone for a regular ovulatory cycle to occur. The second way is through impaired estrogen metabolism and detoxification. One of the hallmark things we see with Hashimoto's is a decrease in bile flow and an impaired liver metabolism process, because thyroid hormones are incredibly important to regulating how our body detoxifies and metabolizes. When liver metabolism is sluggish, this actually impairs how our body metabolizes estrogen. Estrogen goes through our liver and it comes out our gut, and it's all regulated through an enzyme called beta-glucuronidase at that end stage in phase 3 detoxification, which is in the gut. So when this process is impaired because of maybe Hashimoto's underlying, this can actually lead to a recirculation and elevation of estrogen levels, which can cause estrogen dominance, which can really feed this whole cycle of irregular cycles and other types of cycle-related symptoms like PMS-related symptoms. Higher estrogen levels, like what we see with estrogen dominance, can also increase sex hormone binding globulin levels, which is a binding protein that regulates the amount of free estrogen and testosterone that's available, and this in turn can impact ovulation. The third way the Hashimoto's and PCOS can be linked together is through a hormone called insulin. Insulin is a hormone made in our pancreas that's responsible for regulating blood glucose levels and how that blood glucose gets out of our bloodstream and gets into the cells that need it, such as cells within our liver and our muscle. With Hashimoto's, there is generally an elevation in inflammation as well as a decrease in free thyroid hormones. Both of these processes can drive insulin resistance and can reduce our body's ability to metabolize glucose. This means that there's more glucose hanging out in the bloodstream, and that glucose isn't getting into those cells that rely on it. This can lead to more issues with elevated androgens, such as hormones like testosterone and DHEA. When there's elevated levels of these androgenic hormones, this suppresses ovulation and also causes a lot of the PCOS classical symptoms like acne, hirsutism, or that dark horse facial hair growth, and oily skin or hair loss on the head. The fourth way that they're connected is through that chronic inflammation and that elevated inflammatory load. When there is chronic inflammation processes occurring, this can actually directly impact PCOS. And the research shows that chronic inflammation is a main root cause of PCOS because of the oxidative stress process that chronic inflammation drives and how this impacts ovarian production of key hormones like estrogen and progesterone. If you want to learn more about chronic inflammation and its link to hormone conditions like PCOS, you're going to want to watch my next video on how chronic inflammation is tied to hormone imbalances.